Hey everyone! Tonight we're stepping into a wild storm where the golden sands of Ionia swirl with the roar of a newborn soul, its raw power crashing like waves against jagged cliffs. Picture a kid born amid battle cries, tiny fists clutching dusty earth, eyes blazing like a fire that won't quit honestly. You might not survive facing that kind of strength in its chaotic early days. So, before you get too cozy, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I'm doing here. Let me know where you are and your local time. Okay, now turn off the lights, maybe flip on a fan for that gentle hum, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. I'm standing here, winds howling through Ionia's rough stones, telling you about Sett, a guy who wasn't born to sit still. Back in a war-torn village, his first cry thundered like a storm, signaling an unbreakable spirit. His mother, a fierce Ionian with hair black as midnight, held him with trembling hands, while his father, a burly outsider with scarred fists, watched with pride and worry. They named him Sett, meaning the decider, and from that moment he carried a strange mix of foreign might and Ionian grit. I can almost feel the ground shake under that kid's feet, like the land itself knew a troublemaker was rising. Sett's childhood was a mess of punches and laughs, growing up like a weed in the desert, learning to fight without a teacher. One afternoon, he smashed a boulder to protect his little brother from wild dogs, leaving the village buzzing. His strength wasn't just muscle, it was something primal. I've heard whispers that Sett could sense the earth's pulse, a quirky trait Riot never fully explained. Here's a fun tidbit. Ionians believe storm-born kids bear divine marks. Sett has a tiny swirl scar on his shoulder. Coincidence or prophecy? Scholars argue if it's fate or fluke. But I'm betting on fluke. Gods don't have time to doodle on skin. The kid couldn't read, but he sure knew how to scare people. One day, he flattened a village bully twice his size with 2 punches. Folks cheered, though his mom just sighed. Strength isn't for show. Son, I chuckle at that, since Sett clearly ignored her. Life got tougher when his dad vanished in a skirmish, leaving Mom and the boys to scrape by. Sett started working for a small gang, hauling goods and occasionally brawling, his hands callousing while his eyes stayed bright. Joke time once, he tried lifting a heavy wine crate, tripped, and had the whole gang howling, then smashed it to prove he was tougher than booze. But shadows crept in. Rumors spread that his dad didn't die, but joined Noxus, trading Ionian honor for coin. Sett raged, punching through a wall, though his mom just cried silently. That was his first defining moment, a crack in his heart where power and pain began to merge. Scholars debate if his dad truly betrayed them or was a war victim. But for Sett, the truth mattered less than the sting of abandonment. I whisper this tale, letting you feel the desert's cold gusts, his mom's soft sobs, and the fierce beat of a heart growing strong in the storm. I'm still here, wind still whipping through Ionia's rugged edges, guiding you deeper into Sett's story as that scrappy kid starts figuring out his fists. His village life was a grind, days spent hauling water, nights dodging trouble. But something clicked when he turned 10. One dusty afternoon, he sparred with an older cousin, landing a punch that sent the guy sprawling into a haystack. That thud echoed, and I swear I felt the air shift. Sett had tapped into a raw power, a knack for turning his body into a weapon. His mom caught wind of it, her eyes narrowing as she muttered, "You're too wild, boy." But I bet she secretly smirked. Those early fights shaped him, turning a rough kid into a young fighter with a grin that said he'd take on anyone. Sett's family was his anchor, his mom, tough as leather, and his little brother, a skinny kid named Kyle who tagged along like a shadow. They scraped by, selling handmade trinkets, but Sett's fists brought in extra coin from local brawls. One evening, he defended Kale from a gang of rowdy teens, his punches a blur of fury 3 down before they scattered. That's when I noticed his style. No fancy moves, just brute force with a rhythm, like a drum beat you can't ignore. Riot's lore hints at his Vastayan heritage, giving him that edge, and I'll toss in a little flair. Maybe he hummed old Ionian tunes mid-fight, a quirky habit that threw opponents off. Locals swore they heard faint melodies during his brawls, a weird detail that's got me chuckling. Life wasn't all fists, though. Sett loved wrestling with Kale in the dirt, their laughter ringing out until Mom yelled them inside. One joke he once pinned Kale so hard the kid wailed, "You're a boulder, not a brother." Sett just ruffled his hair and grinned. Another time, he tried cooking dinner, burning a pot so bad the smoke chased them out, leaving the village dogs barking. But those moments tightened their bond, a rare warmth in a hard life. The event that stuck was when a traveling merchant offered Sett a job in Noxus, promising gold for his strength. He hesitated, glancing at Kale's hopeful face, and I felt that tug family versus ambition. Scholars argue whether Sett's early fights were instinct or training from his dad's lost lessons. But I lean toward instinct. No one taught that kid finesse. His mom started teaching him basic Ionian values: honor, resilience, though he rolled his eyes at the lectures. I can almost smell the dusty air, hear the clink of trinkets, and feel the heat of his punches as he grew. One night, under a sky full of stars, he promised Kale they'd escape poverty together, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. That vow lit a fire in him, a drive to protect what little he had. I murmur this, letting the soft breeze carry you along, the rhythm of his young heart beating through the tale. I'm still here, the Ionian winds brushing past as we dig into Sett's life, where shadows start creeping into his world. That scrappy kid was hitting his teens when a secret cracked open like a broken vase. One rainy night, his mom sat him down by the fire, her face pale as she confessed she wasn't just Ionian. Her blood carried a hint of Vastayan lineage, a wild strain that explained Sett's unnatural strength. I could feel the air thicken as he stared at her, fists clenching, betrayal stinging like a slap. "Why hide it?" he growled, and she whispered, "To protect you from the shame." That moment shattered his trust, leaving a rift between them I can still sense in the crackling flames. Sett didn't take it well. Days passed with him avoiding her, punching trees until his knuckles bled. Kale tried to bridge the gap, tugging at his sleeve with those big eyes, but Sett just shrugged him off. Then came the event that deepened the wound. A letter arrived, claiming his dad was alive, working for Noxus, and had abandoned them because of that same Vastayan blood. I don't buy it fully. Riot's lore suggests his dad's fate is murky, but let's say Sett found a crumpled note in the dirt. its ink smudged by rain. He tore it apart, roaring, and I can almost hear the echo of that rage bouncing off the village walls. That note, real or not, fueled his fire to prove himself beyond his heritage. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Ionians believe Vastayan blood brings luck in fights, and Sett's mom once stitched a tiny claw charm into his shirt. Did it help? Or was it just superstition? I'd laugh and say it's the latter. But the charm's thread still dangles in my mind. Scholars debate if Sett's strength is purely genetic or enhanced by Ionian mysticism, and I'm team genetics magic's too flashy for a guy like him. One joke, he once wore that charm to a brawl, tripped over it, and still won luck or clumsiness. Another, he told Kale the charm was magic, only for the kid to demand one too, leading to a hilarious scavenger hunt for Vastayan treasures. The tension grew. Sett started sneaking out at night, joining older boys in back alley fights, his fists a blur of anger. His mom watched from the doorway, silent, and I feel that heavy silence now, like a weight on my chest. One evening, he overheard villagers whispering about his half-breed blood, their words cutting deeper than any punch. That's when I saw a shift. His pride turned brittle, his laughter fading. Another joke, he tried glaring them down, but ended up looking like a grumpy cat, which only made them laugh harder. That event marked him planting seeds of doubt about who he was. I whisper this tale, letting the rain's soft patter and the fire's low hum carry you into his troubled heart. I'm still here, the Ionian winds fading into the gritty hum of Noxus as Sett's story takes a sharper turn. That troubled teen left his village behind, drawn by whispers of gold and glory in the underground fight pits. At 16, he stumbled into Noxus's shadowed streets, his fists itching for a challenge. The first night, he stepped into a dingy arena, the crowd jeering as he faced a scarred brute twice his size. With a grin I can still picture, he dodged a wild swing and slammed his opponent into the dirt thud, earning his first cheer. That moment hooked him. The roar of the crowd feeding a hunger riot's lore calls his boss instinct. And I'll add a twist. Maybe he cracked a joke mid-fight. You hit like my grandma's stew, the crowd loved it. Sett quickly became a fixture, his fights a chaotic dance of power. He'd grab foes by the neck, hurl them like sacks of grain, his Vastayan strength shining through. One night, he took down a local champ, a guy named Grook with a metal jaw, and the arena erupted. I can almost smell the sweat and hear the clink of tossed coins as his legend grew. Riot paints him as a natural leader here. And I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he started carving tiny fist marks into the arena walls after wins, a habit that baffled the bookies. Scholars argue if this was bravado or a cultural tic from Ionia, but I think it's just Sett being Sett, marking his territory like a stray dog. Life in the pits wasn't all glory. He slept on straw mats, ate stale bread, and dodged shadier deals. But the money flowed. One joke, he once bet his winnings on a fight, only to realize he'd backed himself. Talk about confidence. Another, he tried impressing a vendor with a fancy punch, slipped on a peel, and landed face first in a fruit stall. The event that defined this phase was his first big payout, enough to send some gold home to Kale and his mom. He stood there, pouch in hand, feeling a flicker of pride, though I sense a twinge of guilt, too. Riot's lore notes his drive to support family, and I'll stretch it. Maybe he imagined Kale's grin as he mailed that coin. The streets toughened him. He learned to read the crowd, their cheers guiding his moves. And I can feel the heat of those nights, the dust sticking to his skin. One evening, a Noxian thug tried recruiting him for a gang, promising more than fists could earn, but Sett just laughed. "I'm my own boss." That refusal set him apart, a lone wolf in a den of snakes. Scholars debate if his early success was luck or skill, and I lean toward skill. Luck doesn't land punches that hard. I murmur this tale, letting the arena's distant roars and the rustle of coins lull you into his rising world. I'm still here, the Noxian arena's echoes softening as Sett's tale weaves tighter bonds with his brother. Those gritty fight nights had piled up coin, but his heart stayed back in Ionia with Kale, that skinny kid who'd grown into a lanky teen. One humid evening, Sett sent a letter home, promising to visit, and the next week, there he was, stepping off a rickety cart into their dusty village. Kale tackled him with a hug, nearly knocking them both into a ditch. I can still feel that clumsy joy, the sweat and dust sticking to my skin. They sparred in the yard, Sett teaching Kyle to throw a punch, their laughter mixing with the clatter of falling tools. That reunion was the event that forged their bond, a rare warmth Riot's lore hints at through Sett's family loyalty. They trained daily, Kyle's skinny arms gaining muscle under Sett's gruff guidance. One afternoon, a gang of local thugs ambushed them, demanding protection money. Sett roared, charging in, while Kyle flanked with a surprising jab together. They sent those goons running. I can almost hear the crunch of dirt under their feet. The thrill of that teamwork. Riot notes, Sett's protective streak, and I'll add a quirky twist. Kale started mimicking Sett's fist-carving habit, scratching little marks on a fence cute. But it drove Sett nuts. Locals joked it looked like a kid's doodle. And I chuckle imagining Sett's exasperated eye roll. Life wasn't all fun. Sett brought home tales of Noxus, but Kale's eyes widened with worry, asking, "Will you stay?" One joke, Sett replied, "Only if you stop punching like a noodle." Kale pouted, but tried harder. Another Sett once cooked a special stew, burning it so bad Kale gagged, blaming it on Noxian spices. That bond grew through sweat and scars, their fights a dance of trust. The event that sealed it was when Sett gave Kale a crude brass ring, forged from arena winnings, saying, "We're a team now." I felt that weight, a promise etched in metal. Their mom watched, her silence heavier than before, and I sense her unease about Sett's path. Scholars debate if Kale's growth was Sett's doing or his own grit. But I'd say it's both. Family pushes you harder. One night, under a flickering lantern, they planned to build a better life. Kale's voice steady despite his youth. I whisper this tale, letting the soft hum of their breaths and the creak of the village night carry you into their shared strength. I'm still here, the quiet Ionian nights giving way to the clang of steel as Sett's story heats up with a new challenge. Back in Noxus, his arena fame had spread, but one day a hulking figure stepped into the pit, a rival named Torv, a ex-soldier with a reputation for breaking bones. The crowd buzzed as they circled, and I can feel the tension, the air thick with sweat and anticipation. Sett grinned, cracking his knuckles, but Torv landed a brutal elbow. Staggering him, first blood drew a gasp. That fight was the event that tested his pride, pushing him to dig deeper into that Vastayan grit Riot's lore celebrates. With a roar, he grabbed Torv, slamming him into the wall, the crowd erupting as dust settled. Torv wasn't done, though. He came back with a chain, wrapping it around Sett's arm, and I can almost hear the metal scrape against skin. Sett broke free with a flex, his strength a spectacle, and finished with a punch that echoed like thunder. That victory cemented his name, but I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he winked at a spectator mid-fight, a cheeky move that became his trademark. Locals debated if it was charm or arrogance, and I leaned toward charm. It's hard not to like a guy who fights with flair. Scholars argue whether Torv's defeat boosted Sett's ego or honed his skill, but I think it did both, sharpening that edge. The aftermath wasn't all cheers. Sett nursed a bruised rib, grumbling about Torv's dirty tricks, and I chuckle at the image, him limping like a grumpy bear. One joke he told Kyle he'd send Torv a get-well card, only to realize he can't write. Another he tried impressing a healer with a flex, only to wince and drop his guard. That rivalry lit a fire, though Torv's crew started shadowing Sett, hinting at bigger stakes. I can feel the weight of those stares, the arena's heat lingering on my skin. One night, he sat alone, staring at his fists, wondering if this path was worth it. Scholars debate if his pride drove him or burdened him, and I'd say it's a bit of both, a double-edged sword. I murmur this tale, letting the crowd's fading cheers and the soft clink of chains lull you into his growing legend. I'm still here, the Noxian arena's echoes fading into a quieter, darker corner of Sett's mind as his past creeps back. Those fight nights had toughened him, but one restless evening, a memory hit like a stray punch his childhood, back when his dad was still around. I can feel the chill as he recalls a day at 5, watching his father spar with a wooden dummy, only to storm off after a harsh word from Mom. Sett had hidden, tears streaking his face, and that abandonment lingered, a scar no punch could erase. That resurfacing trauma was the event that cracked his tough shell, stirring a mess of anger and longing I sense in his tightened grip. He didn't talk about it, just paced the rickety room he rented, fists clenching as images flashed his dad's back turning, the village's mocking whispers. Kale noticed, asking, "What's eating you?" but Sett brushed him off with a grunt. I can almost smell the musty wood, hear the creak of floorboards under his restless steps. Riot's lore touches on his strained family ties. And I'll add a quirky twist. Some say he started punching pillows at night, muttering to an imaginary dad, a habit that left his room a feathery mess. Locals joked it looked like a bird fight, and I smirk at the thought of Sett glaring at stray feathers. The weight grew. One joke he tried meditating to calm down, only to fall asleep and snore loud enough to wake the neighborhood. Another, he told Kale his troubles were just dust. But Kale replied, "Dust doesn't punch walls," earning a rare laugh. That inner conflict shaped him, though his fights got fiercer, like he was battling ghosts. Scholars debate if this trauma fueled his strength or weakened his focus, and I'd say it's a mix, a fire that burns both ways. One night, under a flickering lamp, He stared at his reflection, seeing his dad's jawline, and I feel that pang of recognition. I whisper this tale, letting the soft rustle of feathers and the lamp's hum guide you into his haunted heart. I'm still here, the lamp's faint glow dimming as Sett's story twists into a web of temptation in Noxus's underbelly. Those haunted nights had left him restless, and one smoky evening, a sleek figure approached a Noxian crime lord named Varric, all silk robes and sly smiles. He offered Sett a deal, join his syndicate, use those fists for profit beyond the arena, and live like a king. I can feel the weight of that proposition, the air thick with cigar smoke and whispered promises. Sett leaned back, sizing him up, but the lure of power tugged at him. That was the event that put him at a crossroads, a choice Riot's lore suggests he'd wrestle with. "I work for me," he grunted, but his eyes lingered on the gold. Varric didn't push, just left a card with a crimson seal, and I can almost hear the paper crinkle as Sett tossed it aside, only to pick it up later. The arena still paid, but the offer gnawed at him, especially with Kale's letters hinting at harder times back home. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he started doodling fists on that card, turning it into a weird art piece. Noxian gangsters probably didn't get the humor. Locals whispered it was a sign of his indecision, and I chuckle at the thought of him frowning at his own sketches. Scholars argue if this temptation tested his morals or just his patience, but I think it was both a tug-of-war in his gut. The tension built. One joke he tried rejecting Varric with a dramatic pose, only to trip over a chair, making the Lord smirk. Another, he told Kale about the offer, and Kale quipped, "Just don't punch the boss, lightening the mood." Sett's fights grew sharper, like he was proving something, and I can feel the arena's heat, the crowd's chants buzzing in my ears. One night, Varric returned, upping the ante with a chest of silver, and Sett's hand hovered over it. That moment stretched, his Vastaean blood pulsing with defiance. Scholars debate if he'd have joined without family ties, and I lean no family kept him grounded. I murmur this tale, letting the smoke's faint drift and the silver's clink lull you into his wavering resolve. I'm still here, the smoky haze of Noxus thinning as Sett's tale rises to a throne of dominance in the arena. That wavering resolve hardened into steel when he decided to take the fight pits by storm, turning down Varric's silver for his own rule. At 19, he strode into the biggest underground ring yet, the crowd a roaring beast under dim lanterns. He faced a lineup of champs, each tougher than the last, and with a grin I can still see, he tossed the first guy like a ragdoll thud, claiming the night. That takeover was the event that made him the arena's boss, a title Riot's lore crowns him with. And I'll add a twist. Maybe he marked his first win with a fist-shaped dent in the wall, a quirky signature. He ruled with iron fists and a sharp eye, scheduling fights, collecting bets, and keeping the peace among rowdy gamblers. I can almost smell the stale beer, feel the sticky floor underfoot as he paced. His Vastaean strength turned every brawl into a spectacle, grabbing foes by the neck, hurling them with ease, and the crowd ate it up. One night, he settled a dispute between two bettors, breaking up their scuffle with a laugh. Save it for the ring. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he kept a lucky coin from his first payout. Flipping it before big fights a habit that had bookies sweatin'. Scholars argue if his leadership was brute force or cunning, but I'd say it's a blend force with a brain. The power weighed on him, though. One joke he tried looking regal on a makeshift throne, only to slip and curse, making the crowd howl. Another he once overate at a victory feast, groaning, "This crown's too heavy, that dominance brought wealth," but also enemies' rival gangs eyed his turf. I can feel the tension, the whispers in dark corners. The event that stuck was when he sent half his earnings home. A quiet nod to Cale and Mom, though I sense a pang of loneliness in that gesture. Scholars debate if his rule corrupted him or refined him, and I lean toward refinement. He stayed true to his roots. I murmur this tale, letting the lanterns flicker and the crowd's hum ease you into his reign. I'm still here. The lanterns flicker dimming as Sett's tale takes a heavier turn in the heart of his Noxian reign. That iron rule had brought wealth, but one grim night, the cost hit home with a letter from Cale, its edges torn and ink smeared. Mom had fallen ill, her strength fading from years of hardship, and the village healer couldn't help. I can feel the paper's roughness in my hands, the weight of those words sinking into Sett's chest. He sent gold immediately, but the next missive brought worse news she'd passed. Her last breath a whisper of his name. That loss was the event that scarred him. A wound Riot's lore ties to his family ties. And I'll add a quiet detail. Maybe he kept her old shawl, its threads fraying in his grip. He stood alone in his arena office, staring at that shawl, the crowd's cheers outside a hollow sound. Cale wrote that Mom's final wish was for Sett to come home, but guilt kept him rooted. His success had come at her expense. I can almost smell the musty room, hear the distant roars muffled by his silence. I'll toss in a quirky tidbit. Some say he started leaving a seat empty in the arena for her, a strange ritual that had fighters whispering. Locals thought it was superstition, and I smirk at the idea of Sett shrugging it off. Scholars argue if her death drove him harder or softened him, but I think it hardened his resolve with a layer of sorrow. The pain lingered. One joke he tried sending Cale a cheerful note, only to scribble sorry so many times it was illegible. Another he once toasted her memory with bad wine, spitting it out with a groan. She'd hate this. That sacrifice weighed on him, his fights growing fiercer, like he was punishing himself. I can feel the shawl's texture, the arena's heat pressing in. The event that marked this was when he doubled his arena security, vowing no one else would suffer for his ambition. Scholars debate if this was penance or pride, and I lean toward penance, a rare crack in his armor. I murmur this tale, letting the shawl's faint rustle and the crowd's distant hum guide you into his burdened soul. I'm still here, the arena's distant hum fading into a darker pulse as Sett's story ignites with vengeance. That burdened soul carried a fresh wound after his mom's passing, and one rainy night, a name surfaced in a crumpled note from Cale Joran, a Noxian thug who'd extorted their village, hastening her decline with his greed. I can feel the paper's dampness, the ink bleeding as Sett's fists clenched, his anger a furnace I sense roaring to life. He tracked Joran to a seedy tavern, the air thick with stale ale, and confronted him, words turned to blows, Sett's punch splintering a table. That flare of vengeance was the event that set him on a dark path, A rage riot's lore ties to his protective streak. And I'll add a twist. Maybe he left a fist mark on that table as a warning. He hunted Joran's crew next. His fight's a blur of fury, each punch a release of guilt and grief. I can almost hear the splintering wood, the thug's gasps as he tossed them aside. One night, he cornered Joran in an alley, the man pleading, but Sett's eyes were steel. Only a last-minute flinch stopped him from a killing blow. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he started carrying a small vial of Ionian sand, rubbing it for calm a habit that had foes smirking. Locals joked it looked like a kid's toy, and I chuckle at Sett glaring through the fight. Scholars argue if this vengeance cleansed him or corrupted him, but I think it's a messy middle rage with a conscience. The toll mounted. One joke he tried intimidating Joran with a growl, only to sneeze from dust, ruining the moment. Another, he told Kale he'd teach Joran manners, but Kale quipped, with fists or a hug, that path strained him, his sleep haunted by Mom's face. I can feel the rain's patter, the sand's grit in his palm. The event that defined this was when he spared Joran, walking away with a vow to protect, not destroy. Scholars debate if that mercy was weakness or strength, and I lean toward strength, a rare glimpse of growth. I murmur this tale, letting the rain's soft drip and the sand's rustle ease you into his conflicted heart. I'm still here, the rain's soft drip fading into the warm breeze of Ionia as Sett's tale pulls him back to his roots. That conflicted heart couldn't ignore Kale's pleas any longer, and one dusty dawn he left Noxus behind, the arena's roar a distant memory. He rode a creaky cart through Ionia's winding paths, the air carrying scents of jasmine and regret. I can feel the cart's jolts, the weight of his return as he stepped into his old village. Now quieter, its scars from war still visible. That homecoming was the event that forced him to face his past, a moment Riot's lore hints at through his longing for family, and I'll add a small touch. Maybe he carried a cracked Ionian vase, a relic from his mom's shelf. The village greeted him with mixed stares, some proud, some wary, and I sensed that tension in the air, thick as morning fog. Kale ran to him, thinner but smiling, and they sat by a crumbling well, talking late into the night. Sett traced the vase's cracks, its fragility mirroring his own, and I can almost hear the water's trickle, the soft clink of pottery. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Locals swore the well's echo sounded like his mom's laugh, a weird comfort that had him pausing. Scholars argue if this return was escape or redemption, but I think it's both a step back to move forward. One joke he tried fixing the vase with glue, only to glue his fingers together. Earning Kale's giggle, the past haunted him. One night he visited his mom's grave, the grass damp underfoot, and I chuckle at the memory of him tripping over a root, muttering, "Still clumsy." Huh. Another he told Kale, old fight stories, exaggerating so much. Kale rolled his eyes. Sure, big bro, that confrontation with his history softened him, his fists resting more often. I can feel the cool grass, the weight of silence. The event that marked this was when he vowed to rebuild the village, a promise to honor her, though I sense doubt in his resolve. Scholars debate if this was duty or guilt, and I lean toward duty, a flicker of the sun she raised. I murmur this tale, letting the breezes hum and the well's echo lull you into his reflective peace. I'm still here, The Ionian breeze carrying a hint of hope as Sett's tail shifts toward new horizons. That reflective peace didn't last long. Word spread of his return, and soon a band of Ionian warriors sought him out, their armor glinting under the midday sun. They needed a leader, someone with his strength to fend off Noxian scouts harassing the border. I can feel the sun's warmth on my skin, the clink of their swords as they stood before him, and that alliance was the event that sparked a new path, aligning with Riot's lore of his protective nature. I'll add a small flourish. Maybe he sized them up with a smirk, asking, "You sure you can keep up?" They trained together, Sett's raw power blending with their disciplined strikes, and I can almost hear the thud of practice blows, the rustle of leaves. Kyle joined, eager to prove himself, and Sett taught him to channel anger into focus, a rare patience from the big guy. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some warriors noticed Sett humming old tunes during drills, a habit from his Noxian days that had them scratching their heads. Locals joked it sounded like a bear with a sore throat, and I chuckle at the image of him shrugging it off. Scholars argue if this alliance was strategy or sentiment, but I think it's both strength with a heart. The days were tough. One joke, he once tripped over a warrior's shield, growling. "This ain't a dance floor," they laughed, but trained harder. Another, he tried cooking for the group, burning rice so bad they ate it with grins, blaming Ionian spices. That bond grew, their fights a rhythm of trust, and I can feel the dirt underfoot, the camaraderie in the air. The event that defined this was when they repelled a Noxian raid, Sett leading with a roar. Kale at his side, victory tasted sweet. Scholars debate if this was his destiny or choice, and I lean toward choice, a man forging his own way. I murmur this tale, letting the leaves rustle and the warrior's breaths ease you into his evolving spirit. I'm still here. The Ionian leaves rustling softer now, as Sett's tale builds to a clash that'll shake the earth. That evolving spirit faced its ultimate test when scouts reported a Noxian warlord, General Kren, marching toward their village, his army a dark stain on the horizon. I can feel the tension, the air heavy with dust and dread, as Sett rallied his warriors, Kale gripping a spear at his side. The battlefield loomed, and that confrontation was the event that decided his fate, echoing Riot's lore of his unyielding resolve. I'll add a touch. Maybe he cracked his knuckles with a grin, muttering, "Time to break some toys," a quip that steadied his crew. The fight was chaos. Swords clashed, arrows whistled, and Sett charged Kren, their fists meeting like thunder. I can almost hear the crunch of armor, the grunts as he dodged a blade, grabbing Kren's arm to hurl him into a tree crack. His Vastayan strength shone, but Kren's cunning kept him on edge. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say Sett spat on the ground mid-battle, claiming it blessed his punches, a weird ritual that had warriors exchanging looks. Locals laughed. It was just dirt, and I smirk at the thought of him doubling down. Scholars argue if this victory was brute force or tactics, but I think it's force with a dash of grit. The toll was steep. One joke, he tripped over a fallen shield, growling. "Even the ground fights me." His men chuckled through the fray. Another, he told Kale to duck, but Kyle ducked into a bush, earning a rare laugh. That battle left scars. Kren's final swing grazing Sett's shoulder, and I can feel the sting, the sweat dripping down. The event that sealed it was when he pinned Kryn, forcing a retreat, the warlord's flag trampled underfoot. Scholars debate if this was glory or burden, and I lean toward glory, a hard-won stand. I murmur this tale, letting the wind sigh and the battlefields fade, carry you into his triumph. I'm still here. The battlefields fade, softening into a gentle hush as Sett's tale draws to a close under Ionia's quiet sky. That hard-won triumph left him standing amid the trampled grass, Kryn's retreat a fading echo, and his warriors cheering around him. I can feel the cool earth underfoot, the weight of exhaustion in his shoulders as he looked at Kyle, blood-streaked but grinning. That moment of reflection was the event that let him find his path, aligning with Riot's lore of his enduring spirit. And I'll add a tender note. Maybe he ruffled Kale's hair, a silent promise kept. The fight's end brought peace, but also a stillness he hadn't known. He sat by the village well that night, the stars stretching wide, and I can almost hear the water's gentle lap, the soft rustle of leaves. His shoulder ached, but his mind settled, piecing together a life of fists and family. I'll toss in a quirky detail. Some say he tossed a coin into the well, wishing for a quiet future, a habit that had Kyle teasing him about boss superstitions. Locals chuckled. It was just sentiment, and I smile at the thought of Sett rolling his eyes. Scholars argue if this resolve was destiny or choice, but I think it's choice, a man claiming his own peace. One joke he tried stargazing, only to doze off, snoring loud enough to wake Kale. Another, he told the warriors he'd retire, but they laughed. You a farmer? The journey softened him. He vowed to protect Ionia, not just with fists, but with a steady hand, and I can feel the breeze, the calm settling in. The event that marked this was when he handed leadership to Kyle, stepping back with a nod, his legacy in good hands. Scholars debate if this was surrender or wisdom, and I lean toward wisdom, a rare maturity. I whisper this tale now, letting the stars blur into a gentle haze, the well's echo fading, carrying you into a quiet rest where Sett's spirit lingers, soft and still. And so, my friends, we drift to the end of Sett's journey, his story unfolding like a slow river winding through rugged lands. His life began in Ionia's stormy embrace, a wild child growing into a fighter whose fists shaped his fate. Through betrayal and loss, he carved a path in Noxus's brutal pits, rising as a boss, yet always tethered to family, his mom's quiet strength, Kale's loyal heart, the battles, the scars, the moments of laughter and pain, they all wove together, a tapestry of resolve that softened with time. I can feel the gentle breeze now, the distant hum of a village at peace as he found his place, not just as a warrior, but as a protector. His Vastayan blood pulsed through every punch. His pride weathered every storm. And though temptation and vengeance tested him, he chose a quieter strength in the end. The well's soft ripple, the stars' faint glow, they linger in my mind. A soothing blur where his story rests. Perhaps that swirl scar on his shoulder was more than chance. Or maybe the coin tosses were just whimsy. Either way, they're part of him now, a legacy passed to Kale. I sense no more roars, just a calm that wraps around us like a warm blanket, easing the night. So, as we close our eyes, let the sound of that gentle wind carry you away, the weight of his tail lifting into a peaceful silence. You've journeyed with him, felt his grit and grace, and now it's time to rest. I whisper this final thought, soft as a breath, letting the story fade into the dark, where dreams await. Good night, my friend, sleep well, and may Sett's quiet strength guard your slumber.